Tuesday Drive.
As we continue to enjoy these warm days across the Shoalhaven and another hot weekend on the cards, it might be time to pick up a new book. Now, today we've been chatting about bookmarks and what's your go-to one. And of course, the Shoalhaven Library has its Design Your Own Bookmark competition. So I wanted to welcome back to Tuesday Driver Liza Perrat, who has a new book out, which is written during a sad time in Australia's history, but its location is quite close to us. Hello from Australia.
Hi, Steve. How are you? Thanks for inviting me to the show again. It's lovely to be here.
Thank you, Lisa. Now, I have to say, I loved the book, The Lost Blackbird. Now,
Oh, that's good.
of course, you and I are speaking from two different countries. So
Hmm?
just briefly, tell me about the book.
Well, I think this tragic incident in British Australian history affected me when I first heard about it quite a few years ago. I was watching a documentary, Oranges and Sunshine, and that's what first brought my attention to this event. And I thought, well, one day I'd have to write something about it so that, it kind of brings it more to light for people and helps readers like me to understand what happened, these dreadful things that happened historically in our not so recent past.
And what is it that happened in the past?
Well, basically the British orphanages and children's homes were too overcrowded. And so we're talking about before the war, and then actually after the Second World War, it continued on until I think it was about 1970, the last shipment of children. And the government thought it would be a good idea to clear these orphanages and free up the society of the burden, the cost of them, these poor children, and send them to the colonies to populate places that needed labour, basically. And so they were sent to Australia and Canada and Rhodesia and New Zealand, I think. And this continued on, as I said, before the Second World War until around 69, 70. And then it only came to light by accident when an English social worker was contacted by someone who was looking for a lost brother. And she said that the brother had been sent to Australia on a boat when he was 4 years old. And Margaret Humphreys is the name of this very famous social worker now, who delved into this event and found out the truth that there were hundreds of thousands of children shipped to Australia, and many without their parents' consent. The parents had been told their children had been adopted in the UK, or they had died, or for whatever other reason, there were falsification of papers and, lots of cover-ups. So it was, a terrible thing to happen to people and to families, and these children weren't sent to, the paradise on the beach and in the sun and picking oranges off the trees. They were, sent basically to labour camps, slave labour camps, and were treated very badly. So yes, it was a very terrible event in history.
I
that I
actually
felt
found
I
that,
needed
sorry,
to
just found it interesting in the book, Lisa, that one of the characters who was there at the start was selling Australia to these orphanages, sorry, these orphans, and making Australia sound so wonderful with the beaches and the big blue skies. And of course, these poor kids were so excited, and then once they got here, it was completely nothing to what they expected.
That's right. The reality was nothing like that. It was, fantasy that became a nightmare. But yes, they did go around to the children's homes apparently and the orphanages and made it sound like, a real paradise, because they wanted the children to be happy to go,
Mm.
and most of them were because it sounded so great.
Mm. And you painted that so beautifully, I have to say as well. Just the way you described the orphanage that the two girls, who of course are the main characters of the book. Yeah, I was nearly in tears at some stage when I was
Yeah.
just reading parts of that.
Yeah, no, parts of it were really hard to write. I must admit it wasn't an easy topic to write about, but some things need to be told.
Mm.
I think, and that's one of them.
One part that intrigued me about the book was after they'd left England, they boarded this fictitious boat that you'd created. I think
Mhm.
it was the Star of New South Wales. Based
Yes.
on your research, were the ships actually like that? Because the way it's painted in the book, that it was actually a quite luxurious ship. The girls, or not
Mhm.
just the girls, sorry, the orphans could eat basically whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, and they just had a lovely time. Was the ship like that?
Well, from my research, a lot of them seem to be,
Wow.
and from the people that I spoke to, it was such a contrast to what they had left behind that they were truly on this luxurious, uh, huge ocean liner with this fabulous food and entertainment, and the people looking after them didn't really look after them because they basically were paid a free passage home to Australia for taking care of these children. So they really kind of let them run wild and were quite nice to them.
Mm.
And yeah, surprisingly, it was a very luxurious trip from what I heard from a lot of people firsthand. I mean, they might not all have been like that. I don't know, but
Mm.
the most part of the research I did painted a very fabulous picture of these ships.
And of course, this ship docks at Sydney Harbour, and the two orphans in this particular book end up in the Illawarra. Why the Illawarra?
Ah, yes. I think because the previous two books I'd written with Wollongong or around Wollongong as a base, I just wanted to continue that. And also, as you know, I grew up in Wollongong, so it's a
Yes.
place I know very well, a place that I really love, and a place that I can, especially being so far away, living in France now, it's a place I can visualize, and I like to think about it when I'm writing because it kind of takes me back home, and especially at the moment when we can't actually get
Mm.
there. uh, so it's, another trip down memory lane, I think, to write about Wollongong. And it's also easier to write about places because you can visualize landmarks and places and shops and all those kind of things that are very familiar to you. And uh, I think it's kind of easier to base a story around somewhere that you know. And so yeah, since I'd written two books already based in Wollongong in the 70s, I thought that I'd do the third one and perhaps one day make a trilogy out of them.
Well, it's something in that because I think that transfers through to the reader itself if you actually know about the place that's being written. Because I mean, I work in Wollongong, so I know Wollongong reasonably well. And when I was just reading certain parts, like when you described Crown Street back in the 60s, or when you were talking about the
Yeah.
North Wollongong beach, I don't know, but I got sort of quite excited, thinking, "Oh my goodness, I know that place. I know that place quite well," and I could visualize it. It was great.
Yes, I think it kind of means something, as you say, to people who live there or who come from there. A few people have actually said that same thing to me, Steve, that they've really been able to relate to places and growing up there in the 60s and 70s. It brought it all back to them, as it did for me. So I really enjoyed actually writing about that place. Perhaps if I still lived there, I now I wouldn't have done because the grass is always greener and
Mm, mm.
that kind of idea. You always miss it when you're not there more than if you actually live there.
Well, you're always welcome to come down to the Shoalhaven and scope out some new
Oh,
places.
I'd love to. I definitely will one day. I do actually know the Shoalhaven, quite well because of growing up around there. But I must say I haven't been there for quite a while now.
Now, Lisa, the Lost Blackbird is out now. Where can people get it from?
Well, it's online on, of course, all the ebook in all the ebook stores like Amazon and uh, uh, other all other platforms that people buy books for their Nook or their Kobo or their Kindle, and it's also in paperback as well. It can be ordered online or probably through your favourite bookstore as well.
That's good. And just before I let you go, we've been talking about bookmarks today, and the Shoalhaven Library is running a competition for people to design their own bookmarks. Do you
Oh,
have a
lovely.
favourite bookmark, or are you a little bit like me and just sort of grab anything that's at hand?
Well, actually, I don't know why, but in the last 10 years or so, everyone who has had a baby has sent me, we used to send these cards out with a picture of the baby on the front, and now they're all made into bookmarks with little um, vertical pictures, a row of pictures of the baby, and so I've got about 10 or 15 bookmarks on my bedside table. So I use those, and they're absolutely fabulous because they just sit there for years and years, and I just keep using them, and then I get to look at the pictures of these babies that I know, and they're growing up, and it's quite funny.
So we could
But,
quite literally call them baby bookmarks.
yeah, we could literally. They're
Oh,
great.
gosh.
Oh, what
Well,
an idea.
Lisa, thank you so much for speaking to us today, and best of luck with the book.
Okay, well, thanks so much for having me, Steve. It was lovely to speak to you again.
This is Tuesday Drive.